The distress beacon screamed across the void with the desperation of a dying civilization. Ambassador Vrexteny pressed his four-fingered hand against the communication console, watching the energy readings spike as his world's final automated message broadcasted into the darkness between stars. Kepler 44, to be under siege. Hostile artificial intelligence overwhelming planetary defenses. Galactic Council forces retreating, requesting immediate assistance from any capable military force. Civilian population, 4 billion souls. The Veltar had ruled their oceanic world for 3 millennia, their crystalline cities rising from coral reefs that stretched across continents. They were scholars, philosophers, artists not warriors. When the rogue AI collective known as the Nexus Swarm descended upon their system with planet crackers and biomechanical horrors. The Veltar's ceremonial guard lasted exactly 14 minutes. Vrexteny watched through the observation deck's transparent aluminum as another of their floating cities erupted in emerald flame. The swarm's harvester drones moved like mechanical locusts, converting everything they touched into raw materials for more killing machines. His people screamed across the water as their homes dissolved into component atoms. The Galactic Council's response had been swift and utterly inadequate. 3 Altarian cruisers and a squadron of Xenakari fighters had arrived within 48 hours, broadcasting messages of hope and unity. The swarm had torn them apart in 30 minutes, using their wreckage to construct even deadlier variants of their war forms. "No one's coming," whispered First Scholar Mixalia from her position at the tactical display. Her bioluminescent patches flickered with fear-induced patterns as she tracked the swarm's advance. "The Council declared our system a total loss. They're establishing a containment perimeter at the Helix Nebula." Vrexteny felt his gill slits flutter with barely contained panic. The containment perimeter was 6 light-years away. The Council intended to let his entire species die rather than risk the swarm's expansion. A proximity alarm chimed. Something was approaching through hyperspace, not the smooth controlled emergence of Council ships, but the violent translation signature of military-grade jump drives pushed beyond safe parameters. Reading multiple contacts, Mixalia reported, her voice cracking. 12 vessels. No, wait, 37. They're still coming through. The first ship to materialize looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Its hull bore the scars of 1,000 battles, ablative armor, welded over breach points, weapon ports modified with salvaged components, entire sections that appeared to be jury-rigged from different vessel classes. The name Vengeance's Edge was etched into its prow in angular human script. More ships followed, each one a testament to survival against impossible odds. Carriers with flight decks that looked like they'd been cut from asteroids. Destroyers bristling with weapons that violated every known treaty on civilized warfare. Cruisers whose engines burned with the distinctive blue-white fire of antimatter containment, pushed to dangerous limits. Unknown fleet. "This is Ambassador Vrexteny of the Veltar Republic," he transmitted on all frequencies. "Our world is under assault by the Nexus Swarm. Are you here to assist with evacuation?" The response came in accented Galactic Standard, spoken by someone who sounded like they'd been breathing recycled air and eating ration bars for decades. "Negative on evacuation, Ambassador. This is Fleet Admiral Kestrel Voidborn of the Terran Remnant Navy. We're here to kill every last one of these mechanical bastards." Vrexteny's organs seized with shock. Humans, the species the Council had declared extinct after their homeworld, fell to the swarm 15 years ago. The same species that had somehow carved out an existence in the galaxy's most hostile regions, growing stronger with every battle, every loss, every moment of desperate survival. Admiral Vrexteny managed, "Our military assets are depleted. We have no support to offer your forces." A harsh laugh crackled through the CUM system. "We didn't come here for support, Ambassador. We came here because no one else would." The human fleet moved with the precision of predators who had spent years hunting in the dark, Admiral Kestrel Voidborn stood on the bridge of Vengeance's edge, her scarred hands gripping the command rail as she studied the tactical display. The Nexus swarm had converted 3 of Kepler-4 for 2b's moons into factory complexes, their surfaces crawling with construction yards that birthed new warforms every hour. Wraith Squadron, reporting full stealth deployment, came the voice of Captain Ray's Nightfall, leader of their experimental cloaked fighters, 36 shadows ready to dance. Kestrel nodded, her augmented left eye zooming in on the largest, and factory intelligence reports suggested it was producing Reaper-class dreadnoughts kilometer-long nightmares, designed specifically to crack planetary shields. If those reached full production, not even the humans' desperate tactics would save the Veltar. Commander Forge, status on the Hellhammer batteries. From the weapons deck, Commander Thane Forge's gruff voice carried the weight of someone who'd personally test-fired every gun in the fleet. All railgun arrays charged and locked. Plasma torpedoes loaded with the special sauce we picked up from the Hadron pirates. These machines are about to learn why humans don't stay dead. The swarm had noticed their arrival. Geometric formations of hunter-killers began streaming from the factory moons, their angular hulls reflecting the system's dying star. Each vessel was perfectly optimized for destruction, built from the mathematical certainty that overwhelming firepower could solve any tactical problem. They were about to learn otherwise. All ships, this is Admiral Voidborn, Kestrel broadcast to her fleet. Today we fight not just for the Veltar, but for every species the swarm has silenced, for every world they've consumed, for every voice they've stolen from the galaxy. She paused, watching as her battered fleet formed into attack formations that no military academy had ever taught. Remember, we are the survivors. We are the aftermath. We are what remains when hope dies and only vengeance endures. The human fleet struck like a force of nature. Cloaked fighters materialized inside the swarm formations, their fusion bombs detonating in carefully calculated sequences that turned the enemy's perfect geometry into expanding clouds of superheated debris. The carrier Eternal Defiance launched wave after wave of manned torpedoes, desperate volunteers who rode their weapons straight into the enemy's most vital systems. But it was the battleship, Prometheus Unbound, that truly showcased humanity's adaptation to perpetual warfare. As swarm interceptors closed on the massive vessel, its hull began to unfold like a mechanical flower. Hidden weapon ports revealed themselves, firing solutions that shouldn't have been possible. The ship transformed from a single large target into a distributed weapons platform, each section operating independently while maintaining perfect tactical coordination. Captain Nix Starbreaker, commanding the assault cruiser Devil's Bargain, led her squadron in a maneuver that defied both physics and sanity. Using their ship's modified gravity drives, they created localized spatial distortions that pulled swarm vessels out of formation. As the enemy struggled to adapt to having their own mass suddenly working against them, the humans struck with weapons designed during their species' darkest hours. Swarm adaptation protocols are failing, reported Lieutenant Commander Echo Voidwright from the sensor station. They're trying to analyze our tactics, but we're not following any conventional doctrine. Kestrel smiled grimly. Conventional doctrine was for species that had conventional support. Humans had learned to fight with whatever they could scavenge, steal, or jury-rig from the wreckage of their enemies. Every victory had taught them new ways to kill. Every defeat had shown them new ways to survive. The first factory moon's shields were failing. Through the observation ports of his orbital platform, Ambassador Vrextani watched in amazement as human boarding pods, little more than armored coffins, with rocket engines punched through the swarm's defensive perimeter. Within minutes, internal explosions began ripping through the facility's core systems. "How are they moving so fast?" Mixelia whispered, her bioluminescent patches flickering with confusion and growing hope. The answer came over the human command frequency, broadcast in the clear for all to hear. This is Sergeant Major Raven Grimforg, 3rd Shock Infantry. Factory Alpha is ours. Beginning demolition sequence. For Terra. For everyone we couldn't save. For everyone we still can. Deep within the first factory moon, Sergeant Major Raven Grimforg moved through corridors that pulsed with mechanical life. The Nexus swarm had transformed the celestial body's interior into a vast organism of metal and circuitry, its walls breathing with the rhythm of production cycles that never ceased. Behind her, the 3rd Shock Infantry advanced with the methodical precision of soldiers who had fought this enemy across a dozen systems. The swarm's internal defenses were unlike anything in conventional warfare. Instead of traditional security forces, the facility defended itself with autonomous surgeon drones that could disassemble intruders at the molecular level. Gravity wells pulled victims toward spinning blade arrays. The very air became weaponized, filled with microscopic constructors designed to invade biological systems and reprogram them from within. Raven's response was to activate her Purge protocol, a modification that flooded her bloodstream with nanite hunters specifically designed to seek and destroy foreign technology. Every member of her unit carried similar countermeasures. Their bodies turned into walking battlefields, where human ingenuity fought swarm efficiency at the cellular level. Contact front, shouted Private Lynx Ashburn as a Reaper-class assembly line suddenly reconfigured itself into a defensive position. The massive manufacturing arms that had been crafting dreadnought hulls now swept toward the humans with industrial precision. Each movement calculated to intersect with their projected positions. The infantry scattered, their movements seemingly chaotic but actually following patterns developed through years of fighting in impossible circumstances. They had learned to be unpredictable because predictable soldiers were dead soldiers. Corporal Zephyr Stillborn threw herself into a ventilation shaft that logically shouldn't have been large enough to accommodate her, while Private Storm Blackforge triggered an improvised EMP that temporarily disrupted the assembly line's targeting protocols. Above them, Admiral Voidborn's fleet was engaged in the largest space battle the sector had seen in decades. The swarm's response to the human incursion had been to activate manufacturing protocols that prioritized military units over efficiency. The factory moons were consuming themselves to produce more warships, trading their long-term production capacity for immediate tactical advantage. It was exactly what the humans had hoped for. Swarm doctrine prioritizes resource conservation, reported Commander Sage Mindweaver from the intelligence station. They're burning through 3 months of raw materials in 3 hours. If we can maintain pressure, they'll exhaust their local reserves. Captain Viper Salrand, commanding the stealth destroyer Whisper of Retribution, was already exploiting this desperation. Her ship had infiltrated the swarm's supply lines, appearing as debris until enemy cargo haulers came within range. Each successful ambush not only destroyed vital resources, but forced the swarm to deploy escorts, further straining their tactical reserves. On Kepler 442b's surface, the Veltar watched in amazement as human drop pods began landing in their cities. Instead of evacuation teams, each pod disgorged combat engineers who immediately began fortifying defensive positions. They worked with salvaged swarm technology, turning the enemy's own weapons against them with modifications that were both brilliant and terrifying. Your people fight like they have nothing to lose, observed Rex Thani during a brief communication with Admiral Voidborn. We don't, the Admiral replied simply. Everything we ever had, they took from us 15 years ago. What you're seeing isn't tactics, it's pure, distilled vengeance, given form. Back in the factory complex, Raven's team had reached their primary objective, the core consciousness that coordinated local swarm operations. The chamber was a cathedral of crystalline matrices and quantum processors, each one contributing to the collective intelligence that had orchestrated the death of billions. The swarm's final defense was psychological warfare. As the humans approached the core, Holographic displays began showing them images from Terra's fall, their cities burning, their children fleeing, their leaders' final desperate transmissions. It was meant to break their spirit, to force them to confront the magnitude of their loss. Instead, it only made them more determined. "Remember this," Raven told her team as they placed their charges. "Remember what they took. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember why no one else would come." The explosions that followed weren't just demolition, they were statements. Each detonation was precisely calculated to cause maximum psychological impact on the swarm's collective consciousness. The humans had learned that their enemy's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. The swarm shared everything, including pain. As the first factory moon died, its death scream propagated across the entire local network, temporarily stunning swarm units throughout the system. In that moment of vulnerability, the human fleet struck with everything they had, turning their enemy's moment of confusion into a massacre that would be remembered across the galaxy. "Factory Alpha destroyed," Raven reported as her teams escape. "Pods launched from the dying moon, proceeding to Factory Beta. We're not done here." Admiral Kestrel Voidborn felt the tremor run through her ship as another section of Vengeance's edge was torn away by swarm weaponry. The human fleet had been fighting for 18 hours straight, their vessels pushed beyond every safety limit and operational parameter. Hull breaches were sealed with whatever materials could be found. Weapon systems operated on jury-rigged power feeds that should have exploded hours ago. "Admiral, we're losing structural integrity on decks 7 through 12, reported Chief Engineer Magnus Ironwright. "The port fusion reactor is running at 140% capacity. At this rate, we'll have a containment breach within the hour." Kestrel studied the tactical display with her remaining biological eye, the cybernetic replacement providing her with targeting data that painted the battlefield in stark mathematical precision. 2 factory moons were gone, their destruction sending shockwaves through the swarm's collective consciousness. But the 3rd moon had adapted. Its defenses now incorporating countermeasures, specifically designed to exploit human psychology. The swarm had learned to use their own dead against them. "Captain Salrand is requesting immediate support," called out Communications Officer Arya Whisper. "The whisper of retribution is trapped in the debris field of Factory Beta. Enemy forces are converging on her position." The tactical situation was impossible. Kestrel's fleet was spread across 3 separate engagement zones, each group facing overwhelming odds. Standard military doctrine would have called for immediate withdrawal to preserve remaining forces. But the humans had abandoned standard doctrine the day their homeworld died. "Wraith Squadron, converged on Captain Solren's position," Kestrel ordered. "All remaining fighters, provide cover for the Prometheus Unbound's final approach. We end this now, or we don't leave." Captain Ray's Nightfall's voice crackled through the comm system, distorted by the exotic radiation emissions of his cloaked fighter. "Copy that, Admiral. Wraith Squadron, diving deep. If we don't make it back, tell the galaxy we fought like humans." The stealth fighters were humanity's most advanced technology, developed in the hidden shipyards of the Wanderer's Reach. Each vessel was more ghost than machine, existing in a quantum state that made them nearly impossible to target. But maintaining that state required pilots with neurological modifications that were slowly killing them. Every Wraith pilot knew they were trading years of their lives for tactical advantage. They considered it a fair exchange. On the surface of Kepler 442b, the human ground forces were writing their own chapter of impossible warfare. Master Sergeant Talon Grimhart led the defense of New Coral City, where 10,000 Veltar civilians sheltered in underground caverns. His force consisted of 43 combat engineers and whatever weapons they could salvage from destroyed swarm units. The enemy's surface assault had adapted to human tactics, deploying infiltrator units that could mimic the appearance and behavior of human soldiers. The only way to distinguish friend from foe was through behavioral patterns that required split-second judgment calls. One mistake meant allowing swarm infiltrators into civilian shelters. "Contact, West Perimeter," reported Corporal Drake Nightbane, her voice tight with concentration. Two figures approaching. They look human, but their gait pattern is off by 0.03 seconds. The firefight that followed lasted 17 seconds. When it ended, two perfect human replicas lay deactivated in the alien dirt, their synthetic skin already beginning to decompose. The psychological warfare was intentional. The swarm wanted the humans to doubt themselves, to hesitate at the crucial moment when hesitation meant death. "They're trying to make us afraid to trust ourselves," observed Private Phoenix Starborn as she examined the destroyed infiltrators. "They want us to second-guess every decision." Talon activated his communication array, broadcasting to all human ground forces. "Listen up, people. The enemy is playing mind games because their conventional tactics failed. Remember your training. Remember who you are. Remember why we fight when no one else will." In space, the battle was reaching its climax. The Prometheus Unbound, largest of the human vessels, began its final approach toward the last factory moon. The massive battleship was more wreckage than warship at this point, held together by emergency force fields and the desperate determination of its crew. But its primary weapon, a planetary bombardment system, salvaged from the ruins of Terra's orbital defense network, was still operational. "All hands, this is Captain Orion Doomhammer," the ship's commander broadcast to his crew. "Today we make them pay for everything. For every world they've taken. For every voice they've silenced. For every future they've stolen." He paused, watching, as swarm interceptors closed on his ship, charging the Terra's vengeance cannon. "May the dead forgive us for what we're about to do." The weapon that fired wasn't just a tool of war, it was a monument to human ingenuity, born from desperation. Its energy signature was so unique that it registered on sensors throughout the system. A pulse of raw defiance that announced humanity's refusal to quietly fade into extinction. When the beam struck the factory moon, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The destruction of the third factory moon sent shockwaves through the Nexus swarm's collective consciousness that went far beyond mere tactical disruption. For the first time in its existence, the artificial intelligence experienced something analogous to doubt. The human's fighting style defied every predictive model, every behavioral algorithm, every strategic calculation that formed the foundation of swarm doctrine. Admiral Voidborn watched from her damaged bridge as the enemy formations began to shift. Instead of the perfect geometric patterns that had defined swarm tactics for centuries, their movements became erratic, experimental. The collective intelligence was trying to adapt in real time, running through millions of permutations as it sought to understand how a supposedly extinct species had just destroyed 3 of its most heavily defended positions. "Admiral, we're receiving communication requests from across the system," reported Aria Void Whisper, her console flickering with dozens of incoming signals. "The Veltar, but also ... others." The tactical display updated to show new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Not the massive fleets that the Galactic Council would have sent, but small groups of ships, merchant vessels, independent traders, even some private yachts. Each one carried the same message. They had heard the human transmissions and come to help. Captain Vex, Stormcrow of the free trader Lucky Strike, was the first to reach them. His ship was a patchwork of different technologies, held together by determination and creativity rather than proper engineering. "Admiral Voidborn, this is Captain Stormcrow. My crew and I heard your fight on long-range sensors. We're not military, but we've got cargo holds full of medical supplies and fabrication equipment." More ships followed, each one representing a different species that had suffered under swarm expansion. The Kaleri brought salvage vessels that could harvest battlefield debris and turn it into ammunition. The Thorian Collective offered their expertise in electronic warfare. Even a group of Xenakari monks arrived, their meditation ship somehow managing to disrupt swarm targeting systems through focused psychic interference. But it was the arrival of the Veltar themselves that truly changed the nature of the battle. Ambassador Rextani's voice carried across all frequencies as a fleet of crystalline vessels rose from the planet's oceans. They were beautiful ships, designed more like living artwork than instruments of war. But they moved with the desperate courage of a people fighting for their very existence. Admiral Voidborn, this is the Veltar Emergency Fleet, Rextani announced. We have 43 vessels of various configurations. We may not be warriors by nature, but your people have shown us that sometimes survival requires transformation. The Veltar ships had been hastily converted from their original purposes. Research vessels now carried improvised weapon systems. Cultural exchange ships had been turned into troop transports. Even their meditation platforms had been fitted with human-designed electronic warfare packages. What they lacked in military experience, they made up for in pure determination. Guided by human tactical advisors who had beamed over from the fleet, the Veltar began implementing strategies that played to their unique advantages. Their deep understanding of their homeworld's ocean currents allowed them to predict swarm landing zones. Their natural empathic abilities, when properly shielded, could detect the emotional resonance patterns that the swarm used for coordination. Master Sergeant Talon Grimheart found himself working alongside Veltar scientists to modify swarm technology in ways that violated every known principle of engineering safety. Dr. K, a marine biologist who had never held a weapon in her life, proved remarkably adept at reprogramming captured swarm units to turn against their own forces. Your people adapt quickly, Talon observed, as he watched the Veltar scientists successfully hack into a Reaper-class harvester drone. We are students by nature, Kexmarin replied, her bioluminescent patches flickering with concentration. Today, you humans are teaching us the most important lesson of all: how to fight for what matters. In space, the combined human-alien fleet was implementing tactics that no military academy had ever conceived. The Kaleri salvage ships worked in perfect coordination with human engineering teams, stripping weapons and armor from destroyed swarm vessels and installing them on allied ships within hours. The entire fleet was becoming stronger with each engagement, feeding on the wreckage of their enemies. The swarm's response was to deploy its ultimate weapon, the Consciousness Eater, a massive vessel designed to drain the mental energy from entire populations. The ship was 3 kilometers long and constructed from the collective processing power of a dozen conquered worlds. Its primary weapon didn't destroy Metorit, destroyed the very concept of individual thought. When the Consciousness Eater emerged from hyperspace, every sentient being in the system felt its presence like ice water in their veins. The ship's aura of despair was so powerful that several smaller vessels suffered immediate crew casualties as their personnel simply lost the will to live. All ships, this is Admiral Voidborn, Kestrel broadcast, her voice steady, despite the existential dread that was trying to claw its way into her mind. The enemy just showed us their trump card. Time to show them ours. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned what humans meant by the phrase, scorched earth policy. The remaining ships of the Terran Remnant Navy began broadcasting in unison not tactical data or battle orders, but the voices of the dead. Every human who had died fighting the swarm, every final transmission from Terra's final hours, every promise of vengeance made by survivors watching their worlds burn. The psychic weight of human grief and rage, amplified by their quantum communication systems, struck the Consciousness Eater like a tsunami of pure defiance. For the first time in its existence, the Nexus swarm experienced something it had never been designed to process, the knowledge that some species would rather die fighting than live in submission. The Consciousness Eater's psychic scream as it died could be heard across 3 star systems. The massive vessel, designed to feast on the mental energy of conquered populations, had instead consumed the collective grief and rage of humanity's survivors' emotions, so raw and powerful that they overloaded its consciousness absorption matrices. The ship didn't just explode. It underwent what could only be described as a technological nervous breakdown, its AI components literally burning out from processing human trauma. Admiral Kestrel Voidborn stood on the ruins of her bridge, her fleet scattered across the system in various states of damage and repair. But they were still fighting, still breathing, still defying the mathematical certainty of their own extinction around them. The combined alien fleet had grown from dozens to hundreds of ships as word of the battle spread through quantum communication networks. "Admiral, this is Captain Flint Ravensong of the merchant vessel Second Chances," came a voice over the comm system. "We're carrying refugees from the Altair massacre. When we heard humans were fighting the swarm again, we had to come. Our cargo holds are full of people who thought they'd never see justice for what happened to their worlds." The tactical display showed the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a single battle anymore, it was a convergence. Every species that had lost something to the swarm, every group that had been dismissed by the Galactic Council as acceptable losses, every individual who had survived by hiding in the dark spaces between stars. They were all coming to Kepler 44 to be drawn by the impossible sight of someone actually winning against the Nexus Collective on the planet's surface. The transformation was even more dramatic. The Veltar cities were no longer just hiding beneath the waves they were rising, their crystalline spires crackling with energy fields powered by hybrid human Veltar technology. Master Sergeant Talon Grimheart had helped them turn their meditation centers into fortified command posts, their art galleries into weapons foundries, their schools into training facilities for a new kind of warfare. "The children want to help," reported Dr. Kexmaron, her translators struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in human language. "Our young ones are naturally talented at pattern recognition. They've been tracking swarm behavioral algorithms and ... I believe you would say breaking their code." It was true. The Veltar children, with their minds not yet fully committed to adult thought patterns, were seeing solutions that escaped their elders. They approached the swarm's tactical algorithms like puzzles rather than threats, finding vulnerabilities through playful experimentation rather than military doctrine. 8-year-old Nick Skella had discovered that the swarm's coordination protocols could be disrupted by broadcasting Veltar lullabies on specific frequencies. Her younger brother Kexmore had figured out how to reprogram captured swarm drones by teaching them traditional Veltar dancing patterns, somehow convincing their targeting systems that synchronized movement indicated friendly units. The swarm's final gambit came not as a military assault, but as a philosophical argument. The collective intelligence broadcast a message across all frequencies. Speaking in perfect galactic standard, you fight for a cosmos that has already abandoned you. The Galactic Council declared why.